The impact of the climate crisis is becoming more and more obvious to humans and their animal neighbors. But among all species, polar bears might be some of the hardest hit. The bears rely on sea ice for nearly every aspect of their survival. It's where they hunt seals, travel, make dens and mate. So the earlier in the season the ice begins to melt, the less time they have to eat and procreate. The findings were outlined in a new study published in Ecological Applications. Researchers found polar bears are becoming thinner and having fewer cubs, and their declining health was tied to melting sea ice. Climate-induced changes in the Arctic are clearly affecting polar bears, study author Kristen Lader, professor of aquatic and fisheries sciences at the University of Washington, said in a statement. They are an icon of climate change, but they're also an early indicator of climate change because they are so dependent on sea ice. Polar bears are considered a vulnerable species, one level below endangered. If the climate trends continue, their populations will almost certainly deplete even further. Seeing the effect that a shrinking habitat has on polar bears could convince conservationists to take more immediate action. And studying how the melting ice affects them could have broader implications for how it'll eventually affect other species. These bears inhabit the seasonal ice zone, meaning the sea ice clears out completely in summer and it's open water, she said. Bears in this area give us a good basis for understanding the implications of sea ice loss. Lader and her colleagues tracked the movements of adult female polar bears in Baffin Bay, a body of water off the west coast of Greenland, over 2 periods of time in the 1990s and 2010s. Between 2009 to 2015, the bears spent an average of 30 more days on land than they had in the 1991 to 1997 period. That's because sea ice is melting at a faster rate and earlier in the season now than it did even 23 to 29 years ago. Sea ice waxes and wanes with the seasons, and when there's less sea ice, the polar bears take up residence on the neighboring Baffin Island. They wait there until there's enough sea ice to hunt seals from. And the more time they spend on land, closer to the shore and unable to hunt, the thinner they become. Researchers rated the bears' body conditions on a scale of 1 to 3, 1 meaning thin and 3 meaning fat. Fat is good and keeps them warm. Of the 352 bears they analyzed, not even 50 were considered fat. The availability of sea ice was to blame. Researchers found that in years with less sea ice, the bears weighed less. When the bears are on land, they don't hunt seals and instead rely on fat stores, said Lader. They have the ability to fast for extended periods, but over time they get thinner. The last count of polar bears in Baffin Bay was conducted between 2012 and 2013, then, there were over 2,800 bears in the area, according to the Yukon Polar Bear Specialist Group. But the group hadn't recorded how many were there before the most recent count was conducted, so it's difficult to tell whether it's an increase or a decrease. Nevertheless, the results of the University of Washington study are not promising. Melting sea ice is